Tēnā koutou e ngā mana whenua tēnei rohe. E ngā mate, haere, haere, haere atu rā. Tēnā koutou e te whānau o Auckland Unitarians. Haere mai i ngā manuhiri. Haere mai koutou ki tēnei wharekarakia, neki atu i te kotahi rautau e nohu tapu ana. Haere mai e ngā mema o te hui topa. Ko Rachel McIntosh tōku ingoa, ko te kai whakahaere anaenei. Ko Saunoama'ali'i Dr Karanina Sumeo o tātou kai kōrero anaenei. Ko ngā manoa te tangata te kaupapa o te rā. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Kua nui koutou, kua nui mātou. Mā te rongo, ka mōhio. Mā te mōhio, ka marama. Mā te marama, ka mātou. Mā te mātou, ka ora. Greetings to the mana whenua of this place. To our dead, farewell, farewell, thrice farewell. Greetings to the Auckland Unitarian family. Welcome to our visitors and welcome to those joining us on Zoom. Welcome to this church made sacred by Auckland Unitarians for more than 100 years. For those of you in the building, please join us after the service for morning tea. It is our sacrament of hospitality. My name is Rachel McIntosh and I'm the worship leader today. Because it will be Human Rights Day this coming week on the 10th of December, commemorating the day in 1948 when the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, our speaker today is Saunoama'ali'i Dr Karanina Sumeo, former Equal Opportunities Commissioner, and she will speak on the theme of human rights this morning. You are welcome as you are. You find us as we are. From listening comes knowledge. From knowledge comes understanding. From understanding comes wisdom. From wisdom comes well-being. Paul, would you mind lighting the chalice? We light this chalice to reflect the spark of humanity in each of us. We light this chalice in honour of human rights, which are inherent in every person. For human rights inhere in us for the mere fact of our being human, not because we are deserving or undeserving or have earned them or not earned them. For human rights inhere in all people. We light this chalice to reflect the spark of humanity in all of us. For my opening words, I have a poem by Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. The free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with fearful trill of the things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams, his shadow shouts on a nightmare scream, his wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. Please take a moment to close your eyes and breathe. Breathe in the possibility of tomorrow, breathe out what is done. Now, if you wish, please join me in saying the covenant of our congregation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is the sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each other and with our God. The first reading this morning is a poem by Hone Tūwhare, who attended this church sometimes. It is called O Africa. I think it equally lies in any part of the world, including ours, where injustice exists. O Africa. On bloody acts that make less human mankind's brighter sun, let revulsion rise, eclipse the moon's black evil, so that innocence and the child shall reign, so that we may dream good dreams again. Please take a moment again to close your eyes and breathe. Breathe in the possibility of tomorrow and breathe out what is done. We pause at this time to hold and honour the very personal joys and concerns of this gathering. I invite you to come to the front, say your name, light a candle and briefly share your joy or concern. Or for those on Zoom, raise your electronic hands and I will call on you as I see you. Please take another moment to close your eyes and breathe. Breathe in the possibility of tomorrow and breathe out what is done. Thank you. My second reading is The Story of the Pen, and it's by Emeritus Professor David Williams from the University of Auckland Law School. In 1978, I achieved some notoriety in attempting to have myself arrested for the theft of a ballpoint pen from my employer, the University of Auckland. The action was intended to highlight racist policing policies affecting people from the Pacific in that era of the Dawn raids and random immigration status checks. This was a period of rising unemployment as the economy faltered. Neither employers nor the government had bothered to enforce the immigration laws on temporary visas for many years when the economy was booming. Employers were eager to fill labour shortages with migrants from a number of Pacific nations. In the 1970s, however, the police were called upon by successive Labour and national governments to round up overstayers. The random checks conducted by police were not particularly random. A large proportion of overstayers at the time were young people from Europe and North America, but it was Pacific people who were targeted on the streets of Auckland and whose homes were raided. Caught up in such a random check was a 17-year-old worker walking home along Karangahape Road. A police officer asked to see a work visa. Being from Niue, and thus a New Zealand citizen, the young worker didn't have one. He didn't need one. Then, as reported in the Auckland Star, the officer asked about 3 combs that were protruding from his pocket. They were handed over to the officer with the explanation that one was his own and 2 were from his work. He was arrested immediately and convicted of theft from his employer. It transpired that police had failed to contact the Simon Street employer. When they did so, after the employee's conviction, they were told that taking combs, worth 20 cents each, from the reject bin at the factory was a common practice among employees and one that management allowed. Meanwhile, being incensed by the Auckland Star report, I arranged with then newspaper reporter Donna Chisholm to go to the police station where I would confess to the crime of theft from my employer of a pen, valued at about 20 cents, that I had at home. My efforts to get arrested failed. I informed the watch house officer that I had committed the crime of theft from my employer. The officer suggested I might have been doing work with the pen at home. No, I insisted, quite truthfully. Well, the officer replied, we'd better ring your employer and find out whether they want you prosecuted. The Vice-Chancellor and the Dean of Law were contacted. They advised, don't arrest him, that will give him the publicity he seeks. In fact, though, Donna's reporting and subsequent television news items provided considerable publicity that highlighted the discrepancy between the police treatment of an educated Pākehā man brazenly confessing to a crime and of a young Pacific worker walking along the street who was not an overstayer and whose employer did not view his actions as theft. The story of the pen incident has had a number of retellings. The pen itself is now a material object in the Auckland Museum's collections and was the subject of a story by Madeleine Chapman in 2018. I'm sure that the story's recent retellings can be explained by the fact that, though set in 1978, it draws attention to ongoing issues of contemporary importance. That was David Williams. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Saunoama'ali'i Dr Karanina Sumeo. Karanina is the immediate past Equal Employment Opportunities Commissioner, a post she held from 2018 until last year. I've had the privilege of working with Karanina on many occasions, as she is a person who conducted her role actively, seeking out and amplifying the voices of those who were so often silenced by structures and people who sought to deny their capacity to exercise their human rights. Workers, women, migrants, disabled, LGBTQI+, and all who would benefit and did benefit from Karanina and the office of the EO Commissioner as their champion. Karanina.
Good morning, Talofa. It's an honor and privilege to be here. I was just saying to Rachel, I grew up in Ponsonby. Actually, I went to Auckland Girls Grammar just down the road. And as you're talking about the Dawn raids, Rachel, our house in John Street was one of the houses that got raided. And as a child, you know, I didn't know what was going on, but I could sense the fear in my family. And it was an odd time growing up in Ponsonby, in John Street. Across the road was a Palangi elderly couple, and every year they would bring us lemons and kiwi fruit from their garden. And then next to them was the Black Powerhouse, and up the top of the street was the Mongrel Mob. But we never felt unsafe. It was a weird time. And I live out in South Auckland now. It's a different context, but I have lots of fond memories of this place. I grew up with opportunities, and I guess as believers in human rights, we want everyone to have equal opportunity. And you know, I was brought to New Zealand when I was 10, and it was very, very lonely for me because all of a sudden there were these fences, these things called fences, right? I'm used to running wild in Samoa, you know, playing hide and seek with the neighbors. We were all over the place. And we helped each other to, each other's fruits and stuff. And I remember one day at our house in Ponsonby, I was quietly, happily eating peaches off the neighbor's tree. And I didn't realize that he was standing there looking at me. He's probably going, who's this child eating my peaches? And it just occurred to me that I can't do that. Just in the same way as I can't just jump the fence and go play next door. So it was a real big adjustment. But this thing called freedom, I knew what freedom was as a child. And I brought it to New Zealand thinking, and that's what freedom was here also. And so I had to understand that that's not the case. But the freedom of spirit is something that we all want for everybody, for every child. I saw in the Stuff News not very long ago, we know there's a lot of hardship here. That apparently in October this year, 49.4 million was taken out of KiwiSavers in hardship compared to 38.4 million from last year. And data showed about 45,000 people in June 25 had applied for hardship for their KiwiSaver, compared to 18,000 5 years ago. The right to food, the right to shelter, the right to quality education, all our basic rights. We're now struggling as a nation to fulfill. We have no excuse for it. We are a wealthy nation, and yet we have children going hungry. So that is not right. So that is the place of human rights. And I feel like I'm here in a space where human rights, the belief in human rights is a given. It's not a given in other forums. So can I thank you for your commitment, for your humanity, and for continuing to believe in the realization of human rights for everybody. When I started my role as Equal Employment Opportunities Commissioner at the Human Rights Commission in 2018, I had just come out of Oranga Tamariki. So you know what Oranga Tamariki, working with our troubled youth and vulnerable families and youth offenders. I was only in the job about a couple of weeks, and the Public Service Commission, what is now the Public Service Commission, had released its annual workforce report. And the first time I heard this term, gender pay gap. And then I also heard for the first time this term, ethnic pay gap. And just so we all know what we're talking about, the gender pay gap is the gap between men and women, the average pay gap. And the ethnic pay gap is the pay gap. It's being currently used, the comparison between our top earners, well, generally our European whānau, and Māori compared to Pacific, and our Asian brothers and sisters. And I kind of felt insulted. Like all of a sudden, why is it that brown people are earning less than our Pākehā brothers and sisters? And so it was an awakening for me, because I always grew up, like I said, I grew up in Ponsonby. Yes, we had struggles, but I always felt like I belonged, that we were equal. And now seeing this report as an adult was a real disappointment for me. So I joined the ranks of yourselves and the unions and businesses who understood the systemic inequity and inequality and want to make things right. So one of the things that we lobbied for was to end pay secrecy. One of the problems with understanding if you're being paid fairly or unfairly is that people couldn't really talk about their pay sometimes. And in some clauses, some collective clauses, some individual clauses, people weren't actually allowed to talk about their pay. If you did, the employer could take action against you. So if you found out that you were doing the same job, producing the same quality, et cetera, but being paid less, you couldn't complain about it because you're not supposed to know. So thankfully, as a result of that, and as a result of a whole lot of other lobbying, that was joined by the unions, by civil society, by some of our business folk, there's been a recent law change under the leadership of Camilla Bellett. She put the bill in and got support from National and Green Party and Te Pāti Māori. So those clauses can no longer be basically enforced, be in contracts. So that's one win for workers. again, this thing of freedom and equality. When silence is lifted, then you can exercise your freedom and your equality. So that's one positive progress that we've made as a society. Another piece of work that's tied to that, and that's why that Rachel has specifically asked me to talk about, is the Pacific Pay Gap Enquiry, which came out of this wanting to understand why is it that people are paid differently, if they're doing the same job or a similar job to something else. It was wanting to understand, because until we understand what the issue is, we can't move forward. And it also sheds the way people sort of feeling targeted somehow for some reason, they're doing the wrong thing. And that was a really useful inquiry, because while it focused on Pacific, because Pacific were earning the least compared to other groups, we used this as a platform to also try and identify what's happening to our disabled workers. Are they being paid, regardless of ethnicity and gender, are they being paid fairly for their work, and so forth. We looked at our recent migrants and people like, who've just come in, who may not know the value of their talent in our country. The minimum wage in Philippines or Samoa may be quite different to the minimum wage here. And so, but when people are desperate for a job, they will take whatever is given to them. So the power is in the hands of the employer. And so we have these vulnerabilities and we want to change them. So the Pacific Pay Inquiry raised a whole lot of issues like that. And we've used it continuously to advance and advocate for human rights. One of the other things that we also did, and this is something that Rachel has been a leader in, we found a direct link between bullying, sexual harassment, and racial harassment in the workplace and progression. When that happens to a worker, if you're a woman or a new migrant, disabled worker, and so forth, it impacts your performance. And it means you don't progress. If you don't progress, your income doesn't lift, and therefore we're not closing the pay gap. So alongside our unions and our business partners and civil society, we also lobbied government to ratify this convention called the ILO 190 Convention, basically to eliminate violence in the workplace. I went to the United Nations twice and lobbied and asked for other countries to call on New Zealand to ratify this convention. Because we want to trade with the world, we need to make sure that we are doing well in our businesses, treating our people well, and that we're selling goods on an ethical basis and not on the back of exploitation. So this is still one thing that we're lobbying for, and we're hoping that we'll get some bit of attention with, with the ongoing work. But again, I want to thank our unions and our business partners, our women's groups, our migrant workers for raising their voices so that we can take this forward. The cost of New Zealand businesses of bullying and harassment was estimated to be about 1.5 billion a year. And that's just on, staff being absent, filling staff, internal. It didn't count the personal cost to the victim, the impact on their lives, the health. Unfortunately, people have taken their lives as a result. Completely preventable. And why is it that we're not taking responsibility for that within our workplaces? Because that's where it's happening. So we've got a big issue. It's a big issue for human rights, and we want to advance those causes. So I just talked about human rights by the United Nations, didn't I? I was thinking, when I came from Samoa as a 10-year-old, there were times when I would go to school hungry. Went up to Richmond Road Primary. It never occurred to me at some point in my life that this child who was hungry would be the voice for New Zealand at the global arena, calling on other governments to hold our government to account for the rights of everybody. And that is the New Zealand that is, because we believe in equal opportunity. Doesn't matter where you've come from, your origins, you have a right to education, to a good life. And I like to think that dream, the dream that you share in this church for everybody, can be true for every child. And that we never underestimate the power of these moments, these days that we share together, we come together, and we continue to fight and aspire for the country that we want. Our sister there reflected about what's happening in the US. Scary. We never want to go there. We never want to go there. Unfortunately, there are some sectors in our community who feel targeted. So we don't want to go to where America is. We want wealth for everybody, dignity for everybody, as you believe here in this church, the respect for the inherent dignity of all. We are born free and equal. The reality is in Aotearoa, we are not all born free and equal. It's still an aspiration. So how do we get there? How can we bring others to the movement that you've been in for centuries? I go to churches. I go to places where everybody's nice to each other, but equality isn't there. So that's the reality. So I'm very, very honored to be here with you, and I thank you for the opportunity to come and share some of the learnings that we have. And if you're in places of power and places of privilege, keep doing what you're doing and never underestimate the impact that you have on the lives of those who have no voice. I thank you, Whaftai.
Thank you so much, Karanina. I just want to tell everybody one thing about Karanina, which is that she is quite small, as you can see. She's even shorter than I am. But she is fierce, and I have seen her in the Great Hall of Parliament standing up to politicians who wanted things convenient and telling them that human rights are not about convenience, and requiring only large employers to honour human rights does not honour human rights. She's amazing. But now I just ask you to take a moment to close your eyes and breathe in what you have heard, and breathe out what is done. My closing words today are from Australian Aborigine activist Lilla Watson, who was part of a group in the early 1970s who wrote these words together. If you have come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. Now it's time to extinguish our chalice. Paul, would you mind? I invite you to say the words with me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, or the power of transformation. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.